In this video, I'm going to give you 10 templates to answer the question. Tell me about your weaknesses, answers that are always accepted by interviewers in job interviews. Hi, how are you? I'm Romulo Gutierrez, and this is the Job Room channel. I've been a recruiter and selector for 27 years, and everyone knows that the question, tell me about your weaknesses, eliminates a lot of candidates. But in this video, in part A, I'm going to give you examples of what you shouldn't do. And in part B of the video, I'll tell you 10 weaknesses that are accepted by most interviewers around the world. So stay tuned. Let's get started. First, what not to say in part A of the video. Never mention weaknesses that go against the job description. So let me give you an example. I'm in a flight attendant interview. Tell me about your weakness. Well, I can be a bit impatient with stressed and nervous people. So that's a weakness that doesn't look good. It doesn't help you get the job. So try to focus on weaknesses that won't hurt your chances for the position. Even if you do have them, you should choose weaknesses that are less negatively impactful for the job. All right? This is the first type of answer you shouldn't give. In just a bit, I'll tell you the 10 you should mention. Second point, don't do this. Examples of how to dodge the question. So when the recruiter or the manager in charge of the area asks, tell me about your weaknesses, and instead of answering, you say, well, actually, I had some difficulties at my last job where... But then the person just keeps telling stories, spinning tales, but can't actually say what their weaknesses are. The person interviewing you obviously notices that you're doing this, trying to dodge the question. That's not a good strategy either. Third thing, don't do this. Saying, well, weaknesses? At the moment, I can't think of any. Or, well, right now it's hard talking about ourselves, so I don't know. I'm trying to think of what I could tell you, but I didn't prepare for this question. After all, every human being, if I were to write it down on paper or in a notepad, if I spend 20 minutes thinking about my weaknesses, I might come up with 40 or 50 of them. So everyone is full of things to improve, lots of things to work on, lots of weaknesses. And keep in mind that the recruiter isn't looking for a super candidate, a superhuman who never fails or makes mistakes. That's not the point, so don't run away from it. In just a bit, I'll share some examples you can use. And you also shouldn't say something that isn't true about yourself. So, for example, I'm going to mention weaknesses I don't actually have, just so it doesn't hurt my chances for the job. Let me give you an example. Like saying, a weakness of mine is that I'm shy, when clearly I'm not shy at all. Especially because in most selection processes, the recruiter will give you some kind of psychological test. The human resources department will apply some psychological test. So actually, when you answer about your weaknesses, they'll know whether you really have that trait or not. So you really need to be careful about that. Now, part B of the video, the most anticipated part. I'm going to tell you the weaknesses you can mention. There are 10 weaknesses, okay? Before I go on, I'm going to ask you to subscribe, and your like is also important to me. If you want to do a mock interview, I left a link in the description of this video and also in the first comment where you can go pick your time slot. Everything is 100% secure through the Hotmart platform. You schedule your appointment, choose your payment method, and we'll practice the interview with you so you can get a good result. Well, Job Room, new videos every Wednesday, okay? So you won't miss out on anything here. And there in the description and in the first comment, I also left an ebook about job interview tips that can definitely help you. Now, let's get to the weaknesses you can mention. The first one is wanting to please people or liking to make others happy. So that's a weakness I can mention. It depends on the position. So for example, let's say I work a lot with customer service. So tell me a weakness, Romulo. Well, a weakness I have that I need to improve. I really like to please others. And sometimes I have a bit of trouble saying no. That's something I need to work on. Try to show the progress you're making on that. I've already addressed this with my psychologist, with my therapist, but it's a weakness I need to work on. So, look, it's a weakness that for someone who works directly with customer service is actually excellent. Second weakness, you can mention it without fear, depending on the position. That's why I listed 10. Difficulty dealing with something unexpected. Let's suppose the work you do is very routine, very bureaucratic, very. You do a job that requires a lot of routine. There aren't a lot of unexpected things that can happen. Well, let's suppose I work in administration at a credit card store or with payroll deductible loans. And then they ask me, tell me about a difficulty, tell me about a weakness. Look, that's something I struggle with. I'm someone who's very used to routines, to the day to day. I'm very disciplined. When something unexpected happens, I have a bit more trouble dealing with it. If the job doesn't require the person to be very adaptable, you can say this without any problem. Third point, if you don't lead teams and the position isn't for leadership, this is also an excellent answer, which is I don't feel confident delegating tasks. If your job is more hands on, if you have a more operational role, you can say without fear that your weakness is difficulty delegating tasks, okay? For example, I'm going to an interview now where I'm going to be a programmer, a website developer. They ask me, tell me a weakness, and I'm an executor, an assistant, or a support staff. Tell me a weakness. Look, with the tasks I have to do, I have some difficulty delegating these activities to other people. I'm not always sure if they're going to do it right or not. So this is a weakness that I need to work on. That's an excellent answer. Here's the fourth tip of fourth weakness. And one thing, of course, you don't need to mention all of these. I'm giving you a list of 10 so you can pick 2 or 3 that actually fit your personality and that you can mention according to the job you're applying for. Fourth, being overly organized. If the position doesn't require you to work very quickly, doesn't require you to be focused on dealing with unexpected situations, then being overly organized is an excellent weakness to mention. Tell me a weakness you have. Well, a weakness I have is that I really need to be very organized in order to work. I'm excessively organized, and sometimes that ends up bothering the people around me a little. So I need to work on improving this point. If the job requires organization, it's a good weakness to mention. Excellent. That's worth your like. Fifth weakness you can mention without fear. I take a while to trust other people. I have difficulty trusting others. Well, depending on the role, you shouldn't say this, but depending on the position, it's totally fine. Tell me a weakness. Well, I have a bit of trouble trusting others. I need to wait a bit, get to know the person first. Only then can I establish some kind of bond, some level of trust. Until then, I do have some difficulty trusting. Seventh weakness you can mention, being hard on yourself, self-criticism. I, for example, Romulo Gutierrez, have a lot of this weakness, a lot of it. I really need to improve on this. I put too much pressure on myself to make sure things are done well, done right, done thoroughly. A lot of people ask me, but isn't that a strength? It depends. For someone who, like me, often ends up hurting themselves by demanding things that are sometimes out of my control, it's not a strength. So I could answer, look, a weakness of mine is that because I like everything to be very correct, very precise, I end up putting a lot of pressure on myself. And sometimes emotionally, that's exhausting. It's an area for improvement, but to get better at this, I do yoga and I also practice physical exercises at the gym. That helps me. Seventh point. Depending on the job, it's good. Depending on the job, it's not. Being a very talkative person, talking too much, explaining myself, chatting. Tell me a weakness. Well, I really like to talk, to have conversations, and sometimes I talk too much. That's something I need to moderate. For example, the position is for sales. The position is for customer service. You'll deal a lot with people. So being very talkative as a weakness is actually a very good thing to mention. No, Romulo, if it's a job that requires concentration, analytical work, analysis, then that's a bad weakness to mention. Eighth, which is the other side, let's say the shy person. You can say that you're shy. Tell me a weakness. Well, a weakness I have is shyness. Shyness. I'm a quieter, more reserved person, and I need to work on that. In fact, I've been taking theater classes to work on it. For example, well, I bought a course on how to interact and speak well with public speaking techniques. So you need to bring up an area for improvement. If the job requires a lot of contact with people, a lot of contact with clients, a lot of interaction with, well, individuals, then that's not a good weakness to mention. Now, if the position is one where you work more independently, with just a few people on the team doing process analysis, data analysis, then shyness is actually a great weakness to mention. Ninth weakness, being anxious at times. Well, it's good to give some context. There are scientific studies that show anxiety is one of the most concerning issues. Concerning emotional disorders of our century. So I'm very anxious. Without providing an explanation or context, that's not a good answer. But if you explain your anxiety, you can say, I'm anxious. But I can say, look, one of my weaknesses is anxiety. Especially when I'm about to start a new project or work with a new team, right at the beginning, I want so badly for things to work out. It gives me butterflies in my stomach, that fear and anxiety, which I try to control. This kind of anxiety is manageable, but when anxiety gets too intense, that's not good. And a 10th weakness you can mention is the fear of public speaking. I don't know if you know this, but the fear of public speaking affects more than 60% of the world's population. People are afraid to go up front and speak. If the position you're applying for isn't as a teacher, a speaker, or someone who gives training sessions in companies, you can say with confidence that your weakness is the fear of public speaking. Now, of course, this is one of the questions that comes up in interviews. Tell me about your weaknesses. And I've put together a complete tutorial with 10 questions and 10 sample answers in the video right here. Go check it out. It's really going to help you. Wishing you excellent preparation. Take care and see you next time.